Thank you everyone for being here today. For those who are new, this is just an informal, semi-formal convening of folks who are using Power BI in the California Community College system. It's a chance for us to learn and share with our peers. And some history on this convening. So 4 of us, Jaime Rodriguez, David Boutrone, and Daniel Martinez, as well as myself. We kind of are the hosts. We do 4 convenings per year. We'd love for you to join us if you have suggestions. This is an open panel of 4 of us, but we would love more. And we kind of gather our amazing speakers and intake ideas. Well, at the end of the meeting, we'll share contact information about how to get involved. But today we're here with Jessica LaCourse from Sierra College, who has an amazing demonstration for us. And we'll be learning some awesome technical skills from her. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Jessica. And I think while I'm doing that, I'm just going to throw a link in the chat. This is a Google Drive link. Hopefully we tested it out. It should work for everyone. There are 2 files in it, a Power BI file and a CSV file. So you'll want to download both of those and put them wherever, maybe your desktop, somewhere that's easy to access. And Jessica will walk us through how to access or how to set up those files. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Jessica LaCourse. I'm a senior research analyst at Sierra College outside of the Sacramento area. So the team reached out to me and was like, hey, can we do you have a little bit of Power Query? Can we do a little bit of this? Because I believe you guys generally do 20-minute chunks, right? You'll do little snippets with folks and as everyone shares out. And together we put together a presentation will take the whole time. But I wanted to get into this. I'll start a screen share. What I have for you today is a really neat little demo that's going to end up looking a little something like this. You'll have these 2 files. You'll have the PBIT, which is a template file, and you'll have a CSV, right? So we'll get into this because when you download these right off the bat, when you download them, everything is going to come through just fine. You're going to run right into an error. And it's a good thing. It just means that you're not hooked up to my personal drive, right? So what's going to happen here is it's going to say, hey, we can't find these files. And both of them are referencing the CSV, but the path obviously is mine and not yours. I've modified my information a little bit so that I get the same error that you all do. But what the template files do is they create a brand new PBIX file. And so you'll have something that is yours. You're not modifying or overwriting. That template's always going to be there. You can always restart from that template. So feel free to modify and make these yours. So what I'm going to do, okay, thanks for the error. We're going to go into data on this right-hand side. And of course, we have some visuals set up there depending on information that you don't have. So I'm going to go into my data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. We're going to go into edit query, and that will move us over into Power Query. So the steps are already set up for you in here. The structure that I have for you guys, it's done. You can just plug it in, you can play with it, you can tinker with stuff, right? What you need to do is modify this source. So it's just a single click on this first step, and then come up into the text line here, and just replace this information with wherever you're storing that file, right? If it's on your desktop, if it's in a Power BI folder, wherever that is, go ahead and modify that file location, right? I made my life really easy. I just changed the name of my data source. And so when that's clear, it says, yeah, actually I found it, right? It's going to load all that information. It's going to save all these steps, and we'll talk more about this piece in a sec, okay? So do that twice, one for each of these tables. Right, come in here. I'm going to source. I'm just going right up to CSV document, which is the source file here. For this demonstration, we opted to do a CSV file, so I wasn't directly linking to our internal servers. You can absolutely set this step up so that you're pulling data directly from your fact table or whatever structure you have where your information is kept. So we'll close and apply. We'll just give it a sec. This isn't a big file. It'll go pretty quick. I know some of you have sat here and waited for that to just like load for like minutes, right? But really what we're gonna walk through today is how to create this structure in here, right? This visual slicer where under one, is this one slicer, right? And in here, I have age range, gender, and race and ethnicity. Of course, you can combine whatever demographics you like. So the way this is set up right now is something that we're fairly used to seeing, right? I'm looking at different genders. What makes this kind of special is that we can actually mix and match our demographics, right? So if I want to look at our women, if I want to look at our African American populations, we can combine those two onto the same graph. And mind you, these are independent and there is going to be overlap, right? So my Black women are going to be in both of these lines in this data set. And that's totally okay. We're looking at the trends for the demographics as they are. We're not putting our students into single identity buckets. We're allowing them to just be who they are and look at these pieces side by side. So this has been pretty well received in here, select and deselect. We'll walk through that. And then time permitting too. I think you guys will really like this. This chart here is kind of generic language for a reason. Course average, this is actually our course success, right? So towards the end of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about parameters and how we can change this to show course success, transition over to course retention. And back, that is actually changing our y-axis in there and that data. So high level of where we're going to end today. We're going to be looking at this slicer. We're going to be looking at parameters. Okay. Oh, I already have a copy open. All right. So what I have here is a really simple format. This should look fairly familiar to you all. And what I have in here, oh, let's run through the data real quick and show you what we're actually working with, right? Give you all a CSV file. And in here, what we have is kind of a mini fact table. So however you're structuring your data, this is the format that I'm using, which has a term code or term identifier, a student ID. These are not real student IDs. This is just made up data so that we have something to actually plug in here, right? A couple of demographics. I chose gender, I chose race and ethnicity data, and I chose age range. And then for outcomes, I wanted to create some filters. So I grabbed our departments or our subject codes and the actual course that students are taking. Retention, yes or no, 0 or 1. And then success in that class, 0 or 1. So really, really simple structure. Hopefully something that everybody can mimic and create on their own. But I wanted to share this with you as kind of that base data. So we just break this up into student demographics and student outcomes, right? So a little bit of that. Okay. So yeah, we have here uh, just an overall line chart. This is going to be overall success. Uh, you'll notice in here, I only have the one data. I only imported this information over one time. So all this is based off of that one spreadsheet, even though we end up with like, well, ultimately 3 tables, right? But 2 tables that are based on that information. So the line chart here, what we're going to do, I'm setting up my notes over to the side. Yeah, so this is a line chart. There's no legend in here right now. And all I'm doing is I'm pulling success over to the fact table or into that line chart, right? And then my x-axis just being terms. So with here, first thing I want to do is I want my success data formatted. I wanted it formatted in percent format. And that's going to change not only my axes here, but also this overlap. So we have a lot of control over how the tooltips look. And I think I really want to emphasize that because a lot of times they kind of get ignored and there's something that our users use quite a bit, right? And so all of this, with this being a numeric format here for success, I'm going to change this in the data structure itself by going up into my column tools and then formatting. I want percent format, show me 1 decimal. This bar chart down here is just distinct head counts. It's a really nice, just simple format. It's been really helpful in conversations too when we're talking about, okay, here's success. Okay, well, how many people is that, right? Especially when you get into your smaller demographics. And so what we'll end up doing is we'll format both the line chart and the bar chart to have those legends that are sliced on the right-hand side. Okay. All right, so let's create that demographics table. I'm going to be using Power Query for this, right? I only have the one table here. This was a direct import from that CSV, right? It looks a little something like this. Looks very familiar. I just formatted that success column. And so the students have 100%. For the actual chart, what I'm doing is I'm taking the average. So it'll be 0 or 100% based on enrollment data. So we just have that one table. What I'm going to do is I'm going to edit query. That brings us into Power Query. I'm going to duplicate this table. Okay. This is going to be my demographics table. And now here I can modify this how I please. So what I'm going to do is I want ID, gender, race, ethnicity, and age range. These are going to be distinct columns, right? That's what I want. So I'm going to remove everything else. And that's under manage columns. So I just have, it's still duplicated, right? But for every ID, I'll have a gender, a race, or an ethnic code, and an age range. I'm not really worried about this stuff by term. You can absolutely, if you have like student services, have your parent column be a term ID code. So if you have students that are using EOP&S from term to term, you can make that your parent column. You just would keep both of those in here. And then when we do joins and stuff, you would just do that. This is a much simpler example where we expect no change out of our students, right? Okay, so what we're gonna do is actually, and this was a typo in that format that, or in the template that you all have. I didn't do this step. You need to remove the duplicates. Okay, so and I can talk through how to change your data later, but be sure to reduce the rows, remove rows, and then remove duplicates. So you now have a one-to-one ID and each of these demographics. The magic of this structure comes with something called an unpivoted format. And so we're going to actually, we've been working in the Home tab this whole time to manage our columns with this new table. We're going to move over into the transform columns. And I just have ID selected. We're going to go into unpivot columns. Okay. And because this is my ID, I want to unpivot the other columns. And what this means, well, I'll show you, right, is this was distinct for this student, 225. And now what I have is 3 attributes to that student, one for gender, one for race and ethnicity, and one for age range. So you have this structure in here, which is what you'll see. And you guys can walk through these steps too with that file. These steps are already done. If you're trying to figure out where something came from, you can step back through. I think this is kind of an underrated thing when you get new information, right? But just walk through the steps and check out what they're doing. It'll tell you what, you know, what is actually happening. This reference up in here is just a reference to that last step. Okay. So we have a brand new table now, demographics. It has 3 columns, ID, attribute, which is a demographic attribute, and the values. Okay. So I'm going to go back to home. I'm going to close and apply my changes. I'm going to let it upload. All right. So I did this work already, right? So I get to cheat a little bit. Under view, I'm going to show my different pieces in here. So that's the selection tool. I've already built this visual slicer, right? I'm going to do it again. So I opted to, this is a really nice tool, by the way. It doesn't come organized. I really recommend taking the time to actually organize your data elements through the selection tool. It helps with troubleshooting. It helps so much with troubleshooting when things are just kind of going awry or you have a hidden slicer. Hidden slicers happen when you start syncing stuff. I've seen it all the time where there's just a hidden slicer up here and it's just changing all of my data and I can't figure out what's going on. It's because something else was going on a different tab. So a big shout out for like the selections. It's underrated and totally worth your time to learn how to do. So selections, I'm going to minimize that. Let's check out this visualization here. And what I want to do, well, let's start here. When you guys are clicking through this, these items are grouped. Do you see this big box around it? To actually get into here, it's just one more click to get in there. And that's just to help with my organization. That is these structurals. Do you see them kind of highlight? So that just helps me stay organized. So it's just a double click to get into there sometimes. Okay, we have brand new demographics. We have values, right? I'm going to add these to my legend. And it's going to air out. Okay. So what we're going to do is actually go into the slicer. I want my values here. Okay. So we have, well, let's take a step back. And I'll show you why this happened, right? That's airing out. And I have my slicers here. If I click on them, you notice that nothing's changing. We have no relationship set up here yet between these 2 tables. Okay. So what we'll do, this is model view on the left-hand side. And what I want to do, I always want to hide my data. That's a huge thing, especially anything with IDs. Excuse me. And so the reason that those 2 were airing out or they're not interacting right is because we haven't set up a relationship between those 2 tables. In this case, I want my demographics matched to IDs. I know that this ID here from my demographics table is this ID from the fact table because we built demographics off of the fact table. In data structures, many-to-many relationships are pretty well frowned upon in this case. And what this is actually doing is behind the scenes, it's creating a single table that connects these two to this is too nerdy right now, but basically there's like, it creates one column that is just IDs so that there's 2 relationships from either side to link that ID on either side. I don't know if that made any sense, but I just thought it was really neat how Power BI kind of gets around many-to-many relationships. Cross filtering, I have filters, I have slicers on both sides. I have slicers In fact table, I want to be able to filter by the subject and the course. And I want to be able to use that new right-hand side value filter. So I have filters on both sides. Okay, so we'll save that. There's going to be a relationship here. This little double arrow out tells me the direction, right, of my filters. Okay. There's a lot of stuff. This is why we recorded everything, so we can run back through it. Okay, so this looks very familiar. Nothing really changed. But now, if I'm looking at 18 to 20-year-olds, you see that? So it's more distinct down in here, right? With my head count, 7,200 students total, spring 24. How many of them are 18 to 20-year-olds? About 6,700, 6,800 of them. And so this is actually shifting, and it's only showing 18 to 20-year-olds. But what you notice too, right, is that it's still only one line, and all we seem to be kind of doing is adding these all up. And that's when we add this into the legend, when we add the values into the legend. And we'll pretty this up. Okay, so I have my line chart selected. I'm adding to the legend. And what we have now is individual lines for each of these values, right? And I chose black and gray today because we never get to work in black and gray. It's just something kind of different and fun. You notice these nulls? That is actually something that I want to pull out of the data. And it's just an error from creating fake data. So you shouldn't necessarily have nulls. I'm just going to jump back in here to value. And I'm going to say, hey, select all except null. And I think there's only 2 values in there. Not totally sure what happened, but it was I do know that it was from the process of like just making false info, like the false data set. Okay, so this is not particularly pretty on this side, right? So you have 2 options in here. You can drag your fields over. And so now I have drop downs with something like this where these groups are very naturally set up, right? These are all race and ethnicity groups. You can just use and you can rename. You would have to rename it at this level when it's still part of fact table as a title. You can absolutely come in here with these attributes or do a find and replace and just have those as your headers. I am going to show you how to do groups. I actually quite like groups. Groups come in handy, not so much in this case, but when you're working with student services, right? We use it for different financial aid groups. If our students are part of student accessibility services or EOP&S, those columns tend to be separate columns, right? It's EOP&S, yes or no, student accessibility services, yes or no. And when you combine everything down, instead of having, yes or no EOP&S, what we do is we end up grouping under student services. And so contextually, doesn't make total sense in this case, but when you want to group like student services or any other likeness, it's a really nice tool to have. So we're going to make groups. I'm going to get rid of these attributes, right? Value, and then new group. This is a really nice way to tidy your data. So all I'm doing is I'm selecting all my age groups under 18, and we'll group. Oh, I just grabbed 18. It's okay. So we'll go here. We'll grab these guys. And then I'm just going to have to highlight this and say, hey, send those over to that group. I can rename this as I like, make it pretty. Okay. Do the same thing here. I'm holding control down to select more than one. Filipino, Hispanic, multi-ethnic, unknown decline, Pacific Islander, and white. I want to group those. I don't want to call that ethnic description. I want to call that race and ethnicity. So just a nice way to be able to tidy up your data, make it just a little bit cleaner. So I have 2 groups now. Take the rest of these all and group. those. I will say with these unknown not disclosed, you notice the other one was unknown decline. You just have to know your data, jump back into the main data source if you want to, and see which belongs to who, if you are not familiar with that. Because yeah, have an unknown, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay, well that didn't change, but now we have these value groups, and that looks much tidier. So same thing, I can grab a handful of different race ethnicities. I can look at different genders, and they're actually all overlapped on the same legend. Okay, same thing down in this bar chart. We haven't really done anything with it. It's just been overall numbers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab the values and add those in there. And that is gonna match that exactly. Any questions up to this point? Okay. So kind of neat. It's a lot of information. I know that. Um, so we have now a slicer, and the subjects still work with this, right? We'll grab math.
All
And so
right,
that's good.
Jessica, I just
Go
thought
ahead.
of a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, so this goes back a few steps. When you created a table based on another table, do you have any tips? I don't know if this is still the case because up until recently I was working in an old version of Power BI.
Mhm.
But I've had issues with like column detection and had to be really careful about what columns I have in the source table.
Mhm.
Do you have tips for that?
Column detection. I haven't run into that issue.
So it's when if I change my underlying data, so if
Mhm.
I add a column to the source table, or if
Yeah.
I remove a column, Power BI tends to kind of freak out. Um, and I have to manipulate my way around that by basically just making sure that the file I'm reading has this exact same column names as the Power BI file.
Oh, um, gosh. So without having to like go basically back to the source on both of them, right? Uh, I, I can't honestly, I haven't run into this before. I think there is a little bit of a difference between like the copy paste option, the reference, and then duplicate, right?
Okay,
And so you may have some luck just referencing that table because that should reference it where
okay,
it is. If duplicates, if for some reason because duplicate should carry whatever, I mean, there's not a lot of steps I have here, right? But duplicate should carry over any changes over into your new table. So kind of a non-answer, but
no, I think that definitely answered the question. And then I saw someone in the chat.
yeah, Brian, do you want to jump in on this? You don't have to.
Uh, from my experience, hey everyone, Brian from Sierra. Um, Jessica, on the top where it says query, it's like the in the middle top section. There's an advanced editor. It's near the refresh preview.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
I've used that when I've had issues, and it's just kind of it kind of looks at what the steps are being applied, but when it comes to like a document, um, on line two, and this is where it's like when I've removed columns and added columns, on line two at the end, it says columns equal 10. It's kind of looking and counting like, oh, okay, these are how many columns are there. If I've added columns, I just add however many that have been added in there, or I'll remove them, or just subtract, just kind of based on how many columns are there, and then it'll kind of adjust based on that. And that's a very high level of how I've kind of worked with some of the things, but when it comes to like at least the column number, like the number of columns, that's how I've kind of worked around it. So the advanced editor, I think, helps a little bit. But I definitely check like the forums and stuff for more detailed answers. I don't have anything on the top of my head, but I do know yeah, for those situations. Like the advanced editor helps a little bit.
I think those are both awesome answers to explore. Thank you, and sorry to squirrel.
No, this is why we're here, right? It's just to kind of figure this stuff out. Because I could, make it look like we can just all get this done in half an hour, but it's going to be a little bit more time to kind of figure out these little bits and pieces where we get hung up. This is really clever. I never realized that this was in here, Brian. So, okay. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, so that step, I didn't change anything. Now I'm like super sus about hitting done. I'm just gonna hit cancel. So getting to that is the home tab, query, and then advanced editor to change the source that way. And this is, you can use those same steps too. We were talking about changing this file source. You can just change that file source here as well to match your path. Okay. I didn't make any changes. I'm waiting for it to tell me I made changes anyway. Okay. Yeah, the selection panel is going to be such a big help. Really, for me, it's when I'm going to jump into this view, right? And you have all these panes that you can show. I only have the one tab here, but how many times do we have different slicers on different pages? We tend to copy and paste. We have templates we use. And so the templates will just kind of have like the same title and maybe the same slicers. You copy, copy, copy. In order to sync those out, yeah, we don't have another page here, but that will kind of show you, hey, show me this tab, or hey, sync it. And a lot of times I won't catch those extra slicers unless I actually come in here and look at everything that I have. These drop downs, these are little groups, right? So if you're selecting more than one, control, right click, and group. And so that's how I'm ending up with these little groups in here. And then just taking the time to name your visuals. It's going to be so handy. You all can look at this. You can get a feel for what's in here right off the bat, right? Here's my footer. Here's my actual, like, what I'm doing. Here's my slicers. Sometimes I'll just name this something really simple, like right side, left side, so I can just like, boom, that fast. Yeah, exactly. Because there's a lot that you can have underneath here that you just don't know is slowing you down. Cool. All right, parameters. Katie, you saw this one and you were like, "Yeah, show me how you do that." So parameters are really cool. They're going to be under the modeling step. And what parameters do is they allow you to toggle between just two different items. I use this in different ways. This is a slightly more complicated way when it's actually your outcomes or your calculations. The simpler way is, if you wanted to change like a legend item and you want to toggle between legend items. So if my legend, you can use it to toggle between all genders and all races and ethnicities, right? So, but what we're going to use it today is to actually switch and change our y-axis to switch between retention and success. All right, so I'm in the modeling tab. I'm going to go to new parameter. I'm going to go to fields because I want to pull different values out here. And what do I want to toggle between? What do I want to switch in between? I want to switch in between success and retention. So I want to just be able to switch between those two pieces. I'm going to leave all the default naming in here. And that is just for familiarity. That's what I did in the template. So I believe this is the report server. I'll have to double check on that. So, but yeah, we'll flip between the two here. I just left these really generic so that it would be a little bit easier to kind of follow along and create. Add slicer to page. Let's see if it behaves. It didn't when I tested this out this morning. Yeah, it just added the one because I have a filter on there. So what this will do is I have outcomes to display. So what you should end up with is a drop down for success and retention. And so that's what happens. That's what's supposed to happen. I just saw that error this morning. I'm like, I don't really know what's going on there. But when you add that slicer in, it'll just give you a drop down with both of these options. And again, these aren't linked, right? They're not linked to anything. And that's largely because I need this to be my y-axis. There is kind of a learn from my mistakes on this one. So what I'm going to do is we're going to actually create a measure, and I'm going to walk through this measure. Okay. So we'll do a new measure. And we're just going to walk through this. And you have this already in that template. All right. So I'm creating a new measure. I'm calling it calculate outcome. I like sticking an underscore at the front of my measures so that they just kind of float up to the top, because Power BI loves to have everything alphabetical on the side. Okay. And at its core, we're going to work this one from the inside out because there's a lot going on in here, right? So at its core, this is a switch statement. Okay, so I just hit enter. It's accepted that. At its core, this is a switch statement. Oh, let me show you what we're actually working with here. Take a step back. So parameter, let me show you the structure here. Parameters are really, really simple. All I did was I hide my data. So parameters are really simple little structures. It's just this small table. It has the name, which is what you saw in the filter, what fields I'm actually referencing, right? And so there's this reference back, minimize demographics, open fact table. It's saying, hey, I'm referencing retention. Hey, I'm referencing success. Okay, so that's the fields. And then the parameter order, when it's actually in those drop-down lists, you can change the order. That's really nice if you have like a handful of persist fields or a handful of grouped fields. I'll basically pair them up as like 1, 0, so I'll have like a 10s group, a 20s group, a 30s group. And so you can actually group your parameters as you need to, so that they actually show up in a nice order for your users and they're not just having to hunt everything alphabetically. The selection options are the default list and order in here. Okay, so I wanted to show you this before moving forward, because what we're doing is we're actually going to be referencing these parameter fields, right? So here's this new measure that I made. And there are basically 2 wrappers on this, and I'll talk about what that means in a sec. But what I'm doing is I'll start on the inside here, and I have a switch statement that says, hey, if I've clicked with that drop-down menu, right, on success, then take the average of success. Otherwise, I want you to take the average of my course retention, right? So this average is just a calculate field that is kept inside the calculate, inside of calculate. Calculate is such an interesting creature where you have your actual calculation, and then the second part is any filtering or modification to this calculation. So the way that calculate is set up is calculate, filter after the comma. So selected value, and then with these selected values, these averages, right? Because if I just left it here, it would only be the overall averages. So I want you to keep any filters from the demographic attribute table, right? So basically give me outcomes based on what attributes I pick and preserve those attributes. I created that as a variable. And then for our values, this is actually our FERPA piece in here to make our information not identifiable. I saved that calculate statement as a variable CS, right? And then I have to close that with return. And then I just come down here and I say, hey, take a look at each of those groups that we have. If there are fewer than 3 IDs, don't show me data, right? Don't show me data. Otherwise, give me that calculation. So a lot going into this. Really at its core, it's this selected value statement that allows you to switch in between success and retention and to do any calculations based on that. Pretty complicated. Don't fret over it. But just wanted to show you what was going on since we had a couple minutes. Okay, so I have success retention. Let's start here. I'm gonna bring back my visualization and select here. Selected my line chart. My y-axis is fixed. It's only looking at the average of fact table success. I'm going to replace that with this calculate outcome. Okay, doesn't look any different. That should be a little intuitive, right? Because I had success before, but now it's going to change for you. Pretty neat. Do a quick modification here. When I hover, I don't necessarily need the decimal point. I want it to be a little more user-friendly. So I'm going to single click here. I'm going to come up. It's going to highlight my tools. And I'm going to go into percent formatting. And I want 1 decimal. Cool. So this is the end product that you all will have, that you all can tinker with. And I'm open to, it looks like I still have math selected here. Picking on math all the time. So, but yeah, this is the end product that you all will end up with. I encourage you to tinker with it, make it yours, and just have fun with it, right? There's different ways with intersectionality. You can bring any filters you want over to this side too, right? So if you want to filter by gender, you can filter by gender. And that will give you that intersectional piece. It just really allows you to be a lot more flexible with your end product and just cater it to your users. That is checking the bottom of my notes, and I've hit the bottom of my notepad here. And we're right on time. I love so yeah, happy to share this. I think it's a really fun, underutilized tool. This ability to pivot and unpivot has been an absolute game changer on our campus with how we have conversations, how we have live conversations with folks. So we can just, change things on the fly. Obviously build out this left side a little bit more to your needs. But just as a demonstration, I'm sure you all are very comfortable with adding slicers in the traditional sense. And so I wanted to give you this to kind of give you a little bit more of that intersectional piece. So open to questions, open to conversations, or anything else you may have. Well, thank you. Yeah. I left my contact information down here at the bottom. This one is really just like, please don't use my information and start marketing yourself as a consultant on this particular product. That was it. But please modify it, use it, share it. We've had such great feedback on this structure. I want you all to just have that same success and to make it yours. And I want to see when you make it yours, please bring those products back. I want to see how you made it yours, right? I love the collaborative aspect of the community. So yeah, always curious to see what brilliant minds have to say and do. Awesome. Glad you guys are finding it very helpful.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Well, it's still open for questions, so everyone think about that. We'll be here another 10 minutes. I know that this was personally helpful to me, so I'm really glad that Jessica was willing to come in and give this demo to everyone. While we're just doing question and answer, I'm going to put a few things in the chat. I'll put the link to the Microsoft Fabric user group where we post all of our events. And I'll put the link to signing up to our California Community College Power BI user group listserv, as well as the emails for moderators of that listserv / these quarterly events. I believe our next event will be in January. I think we are still planning on following the quarterly kind of series. And if you have any feedback, feel free to reach out to one of the four of us, or suggestions or ideas. We can always use presenters, as Jessica said. This group really thrives on the back and forth and the sharing of ideas. So that's what we're trying to foster. All right, I'll start talking. If you have any more questions for Jessica, please use this time.